Special Rapporteur mechanism do complement each other, I think. That mechanism is really the only one apart from the ICC, which is investigating and documenting to a criminal standard. It's not likely to make the kind of reports that I do, for example, recently on the right to health, before that on access to justice for women and girls. So I think there's not a duplication, but rather a complementarity between them. But when we come back to the issue of effectiveness, I think we need to maybe define what do we mean by effectiveness, and we've already had some definitions, and thanks to Dr. Cites for discussing about what we mean by accountability in human rights terms. My view is that there are some areas where there's agreement, and there are others maybe where there are not so much disagreements, but different understandings of what we mean. I think it's agreed by everyone that for all forms of accountability, criminal justice and other forms of accountability, documentation is the bedrock. And that's why the comprehensive mandate of the Independent Investigative Mechanism is so important. As Ms. Abbasi stressed, it's important because the idea is to break the cycle of impunity and therefore the cycle of violence in Afghanistan, which has been perpetuated for decades. Expectations may be about the results. Some, both Afghans and non-Afghans, maybe expect results quite relatively quickly, and others accept that it will take time for accountability, particularly prosecutions, to be completed. And still others consider that accountability is wider than criminal justice, wider even than the conventional transitional justice measures that have been mentioned by others. For example, in researching my Access to Justice report and speaking to many Afghan women and girls, some Afghans defined justice somewhat like Dr. Cites did, in line with access to basic rights, to education, to healthcare, and fundamentally to the restoration of dignity for women and girls. Others have also, however, questioned whether these accountability mechanisms, what difference will they make in the lives of Afghans today, especially those living in poverty in the country? And I think, that's a fair question, and the answer is partly that it's not either or, that there needs to be justice, there need to be accountability mechanisms, but in the message you heard from me earlier for International Women's Day, I was very much calling for continuing supporting both human rights work and the important humanitarian work. I want to end up with this. Last week, I was at the Human Rights Council in Geneva. And when I had discussions with the members of the Human Rights Council, the governments, they were saying, what can we do? That was the most basic common question. There was a sense of frustration that what they were doing was not enough, even though they have established this mechanism. And as was also mentioned, some of them have moved forward under the Sea Law Convention to challenge Afghanistan, possibly at the International Court of Justice. But I think what was underlying this question was an assumption that the Taliban are here to stay for a while and nothing seems to be working. And what I want to do is to suggest that question be turned around. Not what can we do, that is, international community doing something for Afghans, but what can be done together. And this implies a shift from seeing the international community as a savior to seeing Afghans as their own saviors. This was